Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer and artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field. If you've been listening to this podcast or are new to it, I thank you very much. I would also appreciate if you took a moment to follow it on whatever platform you use to listen to your podcasts. Writers of the Future is one of the longest running writing and illustrating competitions in the world, now celebrating 4 decades of providing a helping hand as initially conceived by L. Ron Hubbard. I also want to let you know that the Writers of the Future volumes are available in bookstores throughout the US, Canada, the UK, South Africa, and Australia, as well as through all major online retailers. I'm here today at the Writers and Illustrators of the Future workshop, the day following the awards gala. That's pretty much the highlight of the Writers and Illustrators of the Future, where everybody is acknowledged as being the best of the best. But then we take the best of the best and find a bester of the bestest. And this morning, we now know who they are. And so I'd like to welcome Jack, Nash, and Tyler Vail. Welcome, gents.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for having us.
It's an absolute honor to be here.
Great. So it's settled down, maybe not, but I guess we'll start with you, Jack, on the your journey in terms of entering the contest, how long you've been doing it, how you got started as a writer, and then what it's like coming out here to find that you actually have a whole new family.
Yeah, no, it's been just a wild dream. I've been writing fiction for coming up on 3 years now. I got started as a speechwriter for a former African head of state. She is very different from myself, but I learned a lot about writing, about taking on a new voice. So that made me wonder what I could do if I started writing fiction. So I started learning about the craft of fiction. I started studying. I found the contest. I found the online workshop where I learned a lot of great information from best-selling authors, and I started submitting, and just absolutely blown away that my story, Sun Spirit Snake, was chosen as a first place winner. And then last night was just beyond my wildest imagination, because Nnedi Okorafor, one of my favorite authors doing Afrofuturism, introduced me onto the stage to receive my first place award, which was amazing. I thought it couldn't get better. And then Jodi Lynn and Orson Scott Card, they announced the grand prize winner for the Golden Pen, and that was me. I was floored. I was shocked, but afterward, Orson Scott Card looked me in the eye. He shook my hand. He said, "I really, really enjoyed your story." And that's just lifelong memory there. That felt better than winning the Golden Pen, honestly, seeing that someone I've admired for so long, who is producing such great work, has been able to read my own stories and say, "I enjoyed it." That was just amazing.
That's awesome. And yourself, Mr. Illustrator of the Future, Grand Poobah.
Yeah, it was an absolute honor winning it, and everyone in this contest was so amazing, and yeah, I was just amazed meeting all the other judges, a lot of my heroes, and I watched the event for the last several years, and it did not prepare me for actually being there, meeting all my heroes, making all these friends and connections. And just being around such kind people. No one I've met here has been mean or anything like that. So, yeah, it's been absolute blast.
That's awesome. So now what's your journey as an artist?
Yeah, so my journey as an artist, it was about 5 years ago. I decided when I tried this as a career, and I had been working, side jobs, just making a hustle, trying to get to the point where I could actually get professional work and really level up my art so that people had been interested. And I had been following the contest for years and not signing up, though, because I didn't think my work was quite good enough. And I had just been working on my portfolio and working on the 3 pieces that you submit to the contest to get judged. And it was actually my first time applying that I got offered here to this amazing opportunity.
Oh, that's amazing. It's funny, too, you say that. I interviewed Craig Elliott, who's, to me, is one of the most brilliant artists.
Definitely.
He's the art director for like Disney, Netflix, He's doing a big thing with Marvel right now. He runs the entire art department. Controls all the horizontal and the vertical. He followed the contest from the very beginning. He never entered for the same reason. He never thought he was good enough. I was just like, when he told me that, I was just like, what? He exudes, he sweats amazing art. So there's a few things I wanted to be able to address with this interview, because you've hit the next plateau, but by no means are you at the end of this. You're quite probably not going to have an event like you had last night ever again, but it recognizes you for what you are in a world where there's not a whole lot of recognition of the arts. This is really important, not just for you, the other 11, in the case of you, other 12 winners, because you had the 2 girls from UK, but for all the other people out there that can share your stories, personally, and then realize, wow, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. So with that, what have been some of the challenges? I mean, Jack, you entered what, 3 times?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was my 3rd time entering.
Yeah. So, but you also were writing before, but you're writing in a different universe, a different world, nonfiction. So some of the challenges that you had to overcome, and even if it was be able to develop your nonfiction writing, just to actually move as you were progressing on this line of work of writing.
Yeah, so definitely a lot of challenges. I don't come from a traditional, maybe what you would call writing background. I've never taken an English class in college. I've never studied literature. I just enjoyed reading. So when I was first, assigned to start writing speeches for someone, it was a steep learning curve. I had to really learn how to craft short, compelling sentences. Study flow. Really listen to the head of state who I was making speeches for, to understand her voice, her cadence, learn more about her life. And it wasn't an easy path to that either. It was a lot like working with an editor. I mean, we would know the event that she would be speaking at. I would sit down with her and say, okay, these are some of the things that they would want to be addressing. She would give ideas. Let's focus on this. I would write the speech. She would come back and say, this is good. Let's get rid of this, change this. Very much like working with a fiction editor. So in that way, it prepared me for fiction, for just doing my best effort, understanding that when someone says no, it doesn't mean it's not good. It just means that it can get better. And so when I started writing fiction, I got a lot of rejections. I have plenty, but it taught me that a rejection isn't meaning that you should stop. It just means that you just need to keep trying and keep working. And so applying that to my fiction writing, I think gave me a good platform to start writing the stories that I wanted to tell.
And are you going to stay focused in any particular genre?
That's a great question. If you would have asked me that yesterday, I would have said that I maybe wanted to focus on thrillers, just because that's what I enjoy reading. It's kind of my comfort reading. Like the Jack Reacher series is, it's my go-to when I want to break from the world. But after this win, I think that maybe I should focus a bit more on fantasy and science fiction. I think there's a lot that people can do when they bring things from one genre into another. Bringing some of the more plot focused aspects of thrillers into fantasy is something I'm curious to see how that would work. But then the other way around, fantasy and science fiction is very focused on setting and other world settings. And, what would happen if we brought that into thrillers? How could we change that genre? So I definitely want to experiment and see what happens. It'll depend on the readers. They'll tell me what they like and what they don't like.
For sure.
But at the end of the day, I'm going to write stories that I want to hear.
That's a good thing to do. All right. So now on your art process, one thing I was really impressed with is how many of the winning artists are using traditional methods of, oil. A lot of the stuff is oil, and then acrylic, but the manual stuff. And obviously there are those that, learn to and are using, their iPads and stuff. What's your process?
Yeah, my process is all digital right now, and mostly Photoshop. And I'll start off with doing a lot of sketches and thumbnails, and they're really small. Just you're able to just make out big shapes, and that's about it. And for this contest, I think I did about 18 of those. And then I pick out my favorites out of those, and then I'll take that to a finer sketch so that people can actually tell what's going on. I did about 14 of those for this contest, and Echo was a real pleasure to work with, and helped me a lot on that. And then I will take that sketch, go and get references. So, for example, in the illustration Squiddy that won me the golden brush, I had built a whole 3D model for the actual woman, and then I had got my wife in a dress that was pretty identical, or like a little jacket that was identical to the one she's wearing there. And I'll shoot references, which takes several hours, get the lighting right. I have to go get like a little skull for the skulls in the corner of the image. Look at a lot of references of like squids, how their skin works and shines, and then I'll get all that, and then start rendering the piece and turn it into what you finally see.
It's interesting you say that on the Dan Dos Santos on his talk. Tell me about how that your reaction to his lecture.
Yeah, Dan Dos Santos is one of my favorite artists, and amazing guy. He's incredibly smart when you talk to him, and just sharp as a tack. His speech was so good to watch, and learning his process and how he thinks. And anyone that's thinking about signing up and able to meet your heroes, definitely do it, because it was an absolute blast for me.
Yeah, I was just amazed that he says, I can't trust, just my imagination to replicate. So he takes everything. He just, how the angle, the arm, the angle, the ear, he'll like what you did, he'll make a replica of the thing and then shoot that, work out the lighting, spend hours putting together all the reference shots. Then he'll start painting.
Yes.
It's just, I had no idea there was that much, on doing an event. It's, the data, 80% preparations, 20% event.
Yes.
It's the same thing on a painting. It was like, once I get all this stuff done, then it just goes, then it's just for him. It's just really fast.
Yeah, exactly. And he goes on about once you get these references, you take all the guessing out of it. You don't have to make up stuff out of your mind and figure things out as you go, because art is a lot about problem solving. So if you get those references, it answers so many of those problems.
Right. Okay, now Jack, on writing itself. So you said that you're a fan. You read. So how much did that have to do with conceiving ideas? Because some people just they get stuck because the story never gets out of their head, because you don't know how to the expose to translate it from in here to on the page. So a little bit about your process on that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's something we've learned over this week too. Is it's helped me understand what I was doing right and wrong. Dean Wesley Smith, he talks about writing from the back of your head, which is just letting the creative part of your brain just go unhindered. And then I realized that when I enjoy writing most, what I start out with is just bullet points. I put aside any worry about prose, any worry about the structural things you learn in a lot of writing classes, like 25% you do the inciting incident, then you have at the 50% you have a turning point. I ignore all that. I just type bullet points, because I'm not worried about spelling. I'm not worried about prose. I'm just going the beats. Like, this character does this character says this character reacts this way. We walk over here. And that for me is a really fun part, because then I can just shape the story in my mind and tell myself, well, later I'll go back and I'll write out the prose. I'll fill it out. I'll add more description. By the time I actually finish the piece, it's gone through several drafts, but it's just giving myself permission to be creative, to take on risks. And when I do realize I need to change something, it's a lot easier to throw away 3 pages of bullet points than 30 pages of typed out prose. I have no emotional connection to bullet points. So that process has worked really well for me. And to go back to my background, that's something I learned from nonfiction, from speech writing. When you're crafting essays or op-eds, it's easier to write things out in bullet points so you can see the logical flow of the argument you want to make. And so I brought that over into my fiction writing, and I think it served me well.
Absolutely, it has. Now, you're from Utah.
Correct.
We've had Orson Scott Card, Dave Farland, and Brandon Sanderson, all judges from Utah. We've had many winners from Utah. One of these days, I'm going to figure out, distill down, what is it about Utah that makes it the highest per capita source of Rise of Future winners of any other state or any other nation in the world. So is it the water? Is it?
It must be something in the water, something there. I will say my hometown, it's very small. We're 650 people. Our water is spring water. It comes from a mountain. It is
there you
delicious. I guess it does something from the brain. Everyone come to Glenwood, Utah, drink the water, become a writer. I don't know. Boost for tourism there.
Yes. Yeah, no, it is interesting. I know I've guest lectured at BYU when Brandon earlier on in his career there, and that was actually after that I closed him to be a judge. He said, "Yeah, I entered the contest and was an honorable mention, and it gave me this spark to keep on going and not give up." Dave Wolverton, Dave Farland, the story doctor, just an amazing man. Very, very caring, and Orson Scott Card. He's weathered a lot of storms. He's he's got very strong conviction with his religion, and which I totally respect. And it's funny. He's like, we so love him with this contest. And then when you said that, that on the other, as much as that means to you, what it means to him as well is that's what keeps him coming back. And he does the quarterly. He does his quarterly Zooms, to anybody that's entering the contest trying to win. But it's interesting, as much as the judges, you look at the judges and go, oh my gosh, what you provide to them too is what has them coming and stop working for however many days to be here, because it's not a paid gig for them. So with you as the illustrators, any particular, and I don't want, I'm not trying to know who's your favorite illustrator, because they're all amazing people, but any of them that more resonated with you on what you're doing and how you're currently envisioning your future?
Yeah. I don't want to say who's my favorite, but Dan
I'm not
DeSantos.
asking that. I'm just...
No, it's Dan DeSantos was absolutely amazing, and his thought process and how to get references. Craig Elliott was so great to meet. I don't know how he does these like 8-foot oil paintings that have so much like amazing hue shift and anatomy, and still put a little twist on them where they're not just a portrait. There was another man I didn't know before that had won previously. His name was Irvin, and now he's one of my favorite artists. And the way he talks about art and just how good he is at rendering and bringing a final product and concepts. So I met people that I had no idea who even were, and now after this, they're some of my favorite artists.
Yeah, Irvin Rodriguez is. I have a habit of I just check with people and just stay in touch with them and see which ones, bubble. Like Nettie was one of those such authors that I just really took a liking to her. At the time, she was a published finalist, way back when. And we stayed in touch, and I'd see her at Comic-Con or whatever like that. And we'd have lunch and just chat. And she just gradually just kept on improving, getting more and more, like the African futurism, which is now attributed to her as a source of that, and it's a very popular subgenre now. And then she just earlier, I guess, last year, when she sold her autobiography basically on African futurism and herself, for 7-figure, contract. And it was like, wow. So I'm going to be interviewing her shortly so that the podcast goes out when she, just prior to the release of the book. But, I'll follow and I'll take a look, because you hate to have to admit it, but we're 40 years old, and so some of the giants that started this are no longer with us. So it's a sad thing, but it's also it's a very good thing too that the genre continues to create itself. You are the ones that are going to create the next, incarnations of science fiction and fantasy. So how do you view that responsibility, Jack?
Oh my goodness. Well, the pressure's on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think what's so great about science fiction and fantasy is that the possibilities are endless. I think there was a craft book I was reading where the author was talking about the different genres and how a lot of things have to follow pretty strict rules to stay within the genre. I mean, romance, you have to have people fall in love to some degree. Detective stories, there has to be some crime that someone's working to solve or stop. But science fiction and fantasy, the only criteria is that it be speculative, that it be fantastical. And it's so wide open. I think that's what's so exciting, that this is a genre where you can find things that people haven't done before. I mean, with detective stories, someone solves a murder. After a while, you can read the best detective books there are, but for me personally, at least, that gets a little repetitive after a while, and I start to say, oh, I'd like to read another genre for a bit. But science fiction and fantasy, there's always something to surprise you. Like with Dr. Okorafor, there's Afrofuturism. When you go with Brandon Sanderson, you have these wild second world fantasies. You just have people doing such amazing stuff, and just to think that I'm part of that, or hoping to play a larger part in that, is just really exciting, but also very humbling, because I'd like to make my mark in this very vast universe that I've now entered.
That's great. And then I'm also curious, so without giving it away, and this afternoon when we do our whole thing of how to promote yourself, it'll be a lot easier to answer the question I'm about to ask you. But give a little, elevator pitch on your story that's going to be, well, okay, so he won. So what? So what's the story?
Awesome. Well, I think I'll give you the first line, which is, "No one came to his brother's funeral, not even the spirits. Etienne knew it was his fault." And really, at the heart, the story is about a boy who's trying to overcome his own sense of guilt, navigate his belief, his community, and his family. Um, and I think at its very, very core, it's about the relationships that bind us all together.
That's awesome. Yes. And then when you illustrated Squiddy, because that was a hard story, like, wow. I mean, that was a crazy hard story there to conceptualize, but yet you did it, and your author was just, well, authors aren't normally known for being speechless, but it was very much challenged on how to be able to express what you did with that. So you said that, you gave the mechanical process of, I did 18, then I did 13, and then I did this and I did that. But now let's hit when you illustrated it, you read the story once, you read it twice, you did what? How'd you go through translating a story that you read to what ended up being the illustration for that story?
Yeah, fantastic question. I had read the story several times, and then I would type out key scenes and the overall mood. And John Eric's story was fantastic, and it dealt with such a real issue. And I wanted to convey mood above all else, because I really think that's what the story is about, is a little bit of psyche and dealing with addiction, which is a very real problem, and putting a little bit of a twist on it. So I wanted to try to get that mood in a piece, which was incredibly hard to do, just because it's so real and emotional, and it's really hard to illustrate, and being connected to a character on a Photoshop file, or
Yeah.
or in a portrait or piece like that.
Yeah.
And just to jump in there, I just want to say, from a writer's perspective, the writing in Squiddy is good. From someone who reads a lot of noir fiction, a lot of detective fiction, John Eric absolutely nailed that voice and that genre and bringing it into fantasy, and it is a fantastic story.
It is. And I never have envied the judges on their task of narrowing down and selecting, because I look at, like, however they look at whatever, telescope or glass or filter or whatever they're doing to actually narrow it down, I don't envy them at all. And at Superstars, I had dinner with Kevin and with Mark Leslie, and at the last night we went and had dinner, and they said that not Mark because he hadn't been a judge yet, but Kevin and Rebecca are saying this is the hardest we've ever had. This was like, and I said, yeah, Joni would kept updating me on where we stood on the standings as it was the judging was coming in, and said they're all within 1 point of each other. I said, wow. And then all 4 came in even and had to have a tiebreaker. It's like, I don't know that has ever happened before. So the quality of storytelling, it dawned on me last night walking around, was like, we're always challenged to make each year better than the previous year. And you think, how can we do that? How can we possibly do that? And people have been coming for a long time, said, I don't know how you do it, but you did it. It was better. But one thing is, I realize that every year the contest is a year older and people have been submitting a year longer. The competition is that much stiffer. The number of entries has increased that much more. And so when you hear people, wasn't you particularly, but Jack, but I've been entering for 2 decades. I've been entering since it started back there in in the 80s, early 90s. Like, wow, it's just what these contests have become. And the reason why the judges align their name to it so much is because it is a true meritocracy, and it's beyond any shadow of a doubt. Like, if a person wins, it's because they're really good, because the judges have no idea who they're voting for, because all they ever see is a number. So on the what you're mentioning there about some of the issues that you can deal with science fiction, it's one thing that science fiction does both is the storytelling and the illustration. L. Ron Hubbard says that science fiction is the herald of possibility. He wrote that in the introduction to Battlefield Earth. But you can address social issues with science fiction, political issues, very difficult issues to deal with that are so sensitive on, saying, this and that in real life. People will they'll reject it out of hand. They won't have a conversation. It's like immediately it puts them into their, they're in their fighting stance. Now I'm ready to take you on. But if you take that same situation you're discussing, you put it into another planet, another second world, and then have those characters there being alien or somehow or another not what you see here, and they can then experience those same things. Somebody can look at it and go, oh, how stupid is that? Even that's what's happening here. So can you discuss that a bit too, what your take is on this, on the value of science fiction and fantasy as a genre to deal with social issues, with political issues just that. So
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think, my first exposure to science fiction came from my dad watching, Star Trek on Saturday mornings. I'm sure a lot of other people have similar experiences. And as I got older, I realized that Star Trek it's a political show.
Yeah.
Not for any one political leaning, but at its heart, it was trying to address political issues. And I think that's what's so unique about the genre, is that it offers so many avenues for writers and artists to express or even just think through some of the things that they're seeing.
And religion too.
Yeah.
Scott Card.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes I think as writers, we're not even sure what point we're trying to make until we sit down and finish a piece and go, oh, this is how I think. But I also think for writers elsewhere in the world, it's becoming a very important genre, because it is a way to circumvent maybe authoritarian rule, talk about things that couldn't be talked about in nonfiction, a way to express ideas and needs in a way that is more palatable, but also a little bit more safe.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the current world, that is very important, and that's why it's so important that this genre be supported, because there are, it's not just the United States where science fiction is strong. It's elsewhere in the world, and we really need to support it everywhere in the world, so there's an avenue for discussion and debate.
Yeah. And then with the art, have you found that to be the case as well in illustration on depicting and dealing with social issues that you can't take them head on, but you can take them this other thing and people can look at it and just have a new view at something. Like what you did with Squiddy.
Yeah, definitely. And I see it a lot in B's art, one of our judges here, and how she handles. Man, I'm gonna butcher it here, but
Go for it.
how she handles race and minorities and representing those through her art and people that aren't represented as much as they should be. Bringing that forward in her art has been really great to learn from this past week.
Yeah, B she's a very special person to me, for
100%.
sure. She's one of those people that I stayed in touch with and followed, and we maintained communication. And she called me when she got her first contract for Parker Looks Up. She said, "What should I do? Is this for real? Is this I don't all this stuff here." So then it's okay. You need to get then with Echo and Lazarus, and they definitely helped on contracts and stuff. But she is just brilliant. And then when she was invited out to the whichever NAACP awards it was, she came out there, and so I was her +1, and it was out here in this complex, Hollywood and Highland, where she went there, and it was amazing. She was just she's grown so much and very, very humble, amazingly humble, but what she does, and able to deal with with issues is just it's crazy good what she does.
Yep.
So now you were both sent, I know this for true because I'm the one that sent it, a copy of L. Ron Hubbard's To the Stars, one for you for illustration projects and you for aligning how he wrote that book. And we picked it because that was Rob Sawyer's favorite Hubbard book, to the essays that did. So I'm going to ask you first, Jack. So what do you think of the book? And then how did that help bring what he wrote in his essays that you studied to demonstrable life?
Yeah, great question. So the book To the Stars, it's a really fun read. It's a shorter book. I believe nowadays it might even be a novella. But the whole idea behind it is, if you're in a ship that's approaching the speed of light, time slows down. So that's the basic premise of what happens to this crew of this ship as they kind of become out of time with the rest of humanity, and they come back and forth and see things change. And what Hubbard did that was really fun is he took this idea, but he said, okay, well, what would that mean for cultures on Earth? What would that mean for the crew when they're coming back to a world that has gone through wars? The languages have changed. They don't recognize their own home planet. And it's just fun as the book goes more along, those differences become more exaggerated. From studying anthropology, I was like, yeah, this is a good way to look at, culture would change. You would be a stranger in your own home. It's just a really fun way to say, well, let's take that idea and let's take it as far as we can and see where that story goes. And where it comes back to Hubbard's essays, one of his big things is that he says, you really have to just put your butt in the chair. You have to do the work. And the future is something that you create. And I think that's a really good way to approach things like his own book. You could tell that he was having fun with the idea and he wasn't stopping. He wasn't questioning himself. You could kind of feel through his writing that he was having fun telling the story and he was just going. And it's really fun to see the energy in his prose come through. And it's been good for me to say, yeah, I need to stop doubting myself. I need to trust my own instincts and really just put my butt in the chair and get the work done.
That's good. And yourself, so how does that translate? I know some of the original judges for the contest, like Frank Kelly Freeze, Frank Frazetta, loved L. Ron Hubbard's writing because it was so easy to picture what he was saying for them to come up with illustrations. And you saw on the tour, you saw the all the illustrations that were done for his stories by Ed Cartier.
Yeah,
another very, very famous illustrator of the golden age. So you're on.
Yeah, it was a fantastic story, and his I feel like he was one of the first to do time dilation and tell it really well with traveling from space and then coming back 80 years later, and everything's different in Earth, and trying to illustrate that was difficult. And I almost wanted to put it more in a movie than a single image, because it's such a complex story. But I just went back and did a lot of thumbnails for it and trying to figure out, like, okay, what would I do if I made this as a book cover? And yeah, it's a great story.
Good. Yeah. The original artist on that did Jocelyn. That's the cover that was that ruddy faced, that orangish thing. That was
Yes.
that was the original art cover for that. That was done. So the fact that you're now going to move forward, like, what's your next step? What are you planning on doing? Like, you got short story. You're going to continue with short stories. You're going to go to novels. I mean, novels is where the money is, obviously, but short story is where you get name recognition building as well.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to approach it in two directions. First, I'm going to focus a little bit on short stories. There's a number of story ideas that have come out of the workshop. Those I want to refine and hone and improve, and hopefully submit them to markets going forward. But at the same time, I want to focus on novels. As I write, I realize that my ideas start to become pretty long and complex, and I think I'm one of those writers that is a little bit more home in novels. Even though short stories are great practice for honing craft, I think it's where most writers should probably start, just to be able to finish something. It's much easier to finish a short story than a novel. But I want to really start digging into novels and start working. One of the great things about having the golden pen is now I have some extra money where I can afford to do some more workshops, just to add on to what I've learned here this week. I can afford to just study a little bit more, and that's a really great gift that I now have a little bit more at my disposal to improve my craft going forward.
Good. Now, you also mentioned more workshops. Tell me a bit about the Writers of the Future workshop that I believe you took.
Yeah, so the workshop, it was like drinking out of a fire hose, but like the best fire hose in existence. So it was taught by Jody Lynn Nye and Robert J. Sawyer. They were our instructors. On the first few days, it focused on the basics of craft, going over character, plots, voice, but with the unique thing is that you're hearing it from people who are already best-selling authors, who have been doing this for decades, who are well into their careers. And that's very different than what you would get in a lot of the other workshops or craft books, because you can ask questions. You can say, you said this, I have a question, and they will actually answer that question. But the workshop is also focused on the business of writing. And that's not something I get elsewhere. I really thought about that much, because I'm still at the point where I'm telling myself I just need to write better. But something I learned is to think long term. To really have a career, you need to have that at least in the back of your mind for now. So it's just been great to hear from them, the other guest instructors, also having their perspectives, realizing that there is no one path.
Exactly. That's the point I wanted to really
Yeah.
get across. Like, sometimes they'll actually say, you need to go to conventions. And the other one will say, don't go to conventions, totally contradicting.
Yeah, and I think the big debate of this week was traditional publishing versus indie and self-publishing. One thing I've learned this before this workshop, I thought, the only way to make it as an author is you get an agent, you sell the book to a major publisher in probably New York, you get your book in Barnes and Noble, and then you're set. And what I'm realizing this week is, no, the industry is changing significantly. That is no longer, the only path to success. There are a lot of very successful authors. Some of them are the judges who gone indie publishing or self-publishing and are just as or more successful than the traditional route. So there's a lot about what you want from it, what works best for you as an author, but to not really restrict yourself to kind of what worked 20 years ago isn't what is working now or the only path forward.
Exactly. Now, did you do the Writers of the Future on the writersofthefuture.com? Did you do that workshop that was put together?
Yeah, that was one of the.
That's something that's available to others.
Yeah, no, the online workshop is fantastic. I would recommend that everyone take it. Actually, how I found out about Writers of the Future is I bought Orson Scott Card's craft book on writing fantasy and science fiction. He has a page in there where he mentions the Writers of the Future contest as a place for new writers to look at. As a side note, I had him sign that page when I saw him this week, so it was great to get his signature on that. I Googled Writers of the Future. I found the online workshop. I said, well, this is fantastic. There is Orson Scott Card. There's Dave Farland, Tim Powers. They're going to teach me how to write. And I learned a lot from that workshop. And it was a great basis for me. It was, okay, this is what I need. This is what works. This is a way to start improving. And that really changed the direction of my writing. And it got me here. So I would just highly recommend that workshop to everyone.
Great. And now yourself, on terms of Owen Hubbard's legacy, just having created this and endowed it and continuing to endow this contest, 35 years for illustrators, 40 years for writers. Can you address that, please, a little bit, just what that means to the genre?
Yeah, it means so much. And there really is not anything else like this in the entire world. And, all of us have had people in our lives that have helped us and paid it forward without getting anything in return. And I think Mr. L. Ron Hubbard is at the top of that, really, right? We all wouldn't be here without him, and all the other judges and people paying it forward for pretty much nothing in return except for helping each other fellow human and really pushing humanity to a better spot by helping each other and lifting it up. And it really is what is best about humanity.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too, just the progress of the original illustrator judges were the kings of illustration. And as art and illustration diversifies, you didn't have, it was at the beginning of like the comics back then. So you had Kelly Freas did some, and you had others who were the grandfathers of sequential art. But now you've got people that do movies and TV and the storyboards and all the different aspects to art that someone can like burgeon in. So we have all of these different aspects of art being addressed, with this contest and a workshop. Where do you see yourself going now as an artist?
Yeah, this past week has been so eye-opening on all the avenues you can really go to. There's a judge, Rob Pryor, who
he's crazy amazing
guy. Crazy amazing, and a crazy guy, crazy charismatic also. It's someone you really listen to when they're speaking, and he was incredibly helpful, and his approach has been so different than what I have learned over the last 5 years of making my art. And that dude's going to space. He's
been training for it. He is so buff.
Yeah.
he said I still have to gain 10 more pounds and has to go down to 3% body fat in order to go up there. But he's been commissioned, I think it's 32 paintings, weightless, as he's touring the earth, painting these paintings, and then it's going to go down. I think he's going to place them in the Louvre for display.
Yeah, and absolutely incredible. And his approach, and he was saying he gets up every morning at like 5 and just does studies for the morning. And he says he can draw with both hands, and
his eyes are closed, and he's listening to music. And he's just like, and like, how does he do that? And for him, it's a total out of body thing that he's just like into that creating, and it's amazing.
And, he says he can do up to like 4 paintings in one day, where it takes me at least a week at minimum.
But he taught you a technique.
Yes, yeah, he taught me some amazing techniques in his process, and it was crazy seeing just how different it is, and how successful he is from taking this different approach and being able to be someone that is able to make their own process and learn all these rules from these amazing other artists that are paying it forward, and then take that and put your own twist on it. And I think he's a great example of that.
Yeah, that's one thing that's really interesting too. From a professional, you can like musicians, like the really best musician. I had this experience with Chick Corea. He passed away a few years ago. He was way out there in jazz, but he could sit down and do all the etudes. He could do all the, all the greats. He could do all the classics. He from memory, he could do all those things there and perform them like nobody's business. And then he could take off and then create all this amazing music that's like not like anything else. But he had this basics in to do that. And you take a look at these other artists too. And you got Rob at Echo, what she did. I mean, she's got all of her basics down. She's got everything covered on traditional, but then she can take it and combine this and that, So I think that's one of the things that this contest definitely brings is the ability to just to cross it over.
Yeah, definitely.
So now with writers too, I had some of these earlier interviews I've done with some of our judges on to follow rules, to not follow rules, the value of grammar, the current issues that society is bringing to writing and its impact and its need or not, what have you learned about that? Because it's a real problem. Like, you got the gender identification, you've got, dealing with social issues, problems with drugs, with crime, stuff like that. What have you taken home on that, or what's your take on this?
So far as for making rules and breaking rules, I think one thing I've learned that is there are no rules. When you're engaged in creativity, you want to be different, you want to be unique. And that's one of the great things about fiction is you can make your own rules as you go up. There are things like the basics of craft, but when you want to write about a subject, if it's a subject that's near and dear to your heart, it's up to you to stand out and be unique. And I think that's where breaking rules comes in. You need to find out what your truth is, and then you just need to put it on the page. And if people aren't ready for it, fine. As long as you are doing what you feel the story needs, whatever that is, that's what you should be doing. I mean, the authors who are the judges, they didn't get here by following rules, by being like everyone else. They struck their own individual paths. They talked about what they want to talk about, and they did it in a way that they wanted to do it. And ultimately, that's what set them apart. Writing, the arts, creativity, it's not something where being like everyone else gets you recognized. I think last night, one of the winners in her speech, she said that she realized during this workshop that she was worried about would she fit in, and she realized that no, this is the place where you need to be different. And we embrace differences and we embrace diversity because that's what makes your art unique and enjoyable. If you want something that is identical and the same, you're probably not reading. You're probably not reading fiction.
So your sense of art is the Saturday morning cartoons.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. This is just, it's such a great genre to be in because you can be your true authentic self, and break all the rules that people expect of you. And that is what ultimately gets recognized.
Good. Now, one thing too that I just want to get your take on this as well is family. The Writers of Future family. And it was funny because I'd already talked to most of you because as we were setting up doing media interviews, many of you I was able to call and talk to before doing the interviews just to prepare you, And so I had a good sense of what was coming, but just the change, the metamorphosis of all the winners, that first welcoming night where I was talking to everybody and people were just kind of like, very reserved, quiet, no smiles. And it's like, I'm used to that as the opening thing. And by the end, it's like, smiling, laughing. And so tell me about that, like for yourself, how that happens. Cause it's a thing these are now going to be the friends you're going to have for the rest of your life. You saw the people from volume 1, they're still friends. That was 40 years ago.